Welcome back. I'm Kathy Grady, and this is Longmeadow Living History. And today we have with us Jim Law, who's been in Longmeadow quite a long time.
Yeah.
But where I want you to start is before you moved to Longmeadow, when you visited Longmeadow. Tell everybody about that.
In the winter of 1952, I was working the typical Christmas rush with the post office department. And I was delivering mail in Longmeadow. And in those days, once a month, they had what they called the magazine day. And for those of us from my generation...
So you were living in Springfield?
I was living in Chicopee.
Chicopee. But you got assigned to Longmeadow.
I got assigned to Longmeadow. Yeah. Never knowing the town, only hearing about how high up Longmeadow was in comparison with me in Chicopee.
Fancy.
So to put it in perspective, the books, the magazines that came out in those days, Look, Life, all of those, if you envision the tabloid that we get once or twice a week from the Republican, they were about that. All of the magazines were about that size, but they were as thick as probably half of a Sunday newspaper. So they were pretty heavy and bulky. Well, I was assigned down near Schneider's Market.
Which was then later the community market.
The community market.
Community market.
And I had all these magazines, and they went out like this. And I had to go from there to
You had
deliver.
to carry them for the whole route?
Well, it was a portion of the route, but they were so big that they were out like this. And I had to go from down there up to by the Bliss. And in those days, there wasn't much between those two locations. The town was empty.
Between
there were no
the
houses.
community house on Longmeadow Street and Bliss down Longmeadow Street?
Yeah, and I dropped these magazines halfway through, and they're all sorted by how you deliver. I don't know the town.
Oh no!
The people must have laughed. I was in the middle of the sidewalk trying to put these magazines back together. But
and it's December.
So it's January. It's now January. It's after the first of the year, just after the first of the year, and a cold day. Somehow we got over it though.
And you learned a lot about Longmeadow.
That was my first exposure to Longmeadow. Yep.
So you went down Longmeadow Street to Bliss and then over, or?
I would guess I went up across Farmington and over to
Laurel,
and then on over to I don't even remember really where I delivered over there near Bliss. It was somewhere near the Bliss courts. It was still at that time I was unfamiliar with the town.
All right, so that's like, yeah, and then there was nothing beyond that.
Oh no. I don't remember. I don't think the high school. No, the high school wasn't even there then.
The high school wasn't there until May.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't too much later though that the high school was built.
No, it's around 54, 55.
Yeah.
Right. The first class that went through the high school probably opened in 56. Graduated in 59.
Yeah, one of my former neighbors was in that first graduating class, Ned Cummings, who was a park commissioner for a number of years.
Oh yes. And Linda Abrams was in that class, and she's been here in the chair you're in.
You wonder what they would think of the current one going up.
I know. Well, that was a big fight back then, too.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Very big conversation, you bet. A lot of people said, because Longmeadow was basically then what they called the street, Longmeadow Street.
Yep.
And then the spurs off it, because of the trolley, they called them trolley spurs. They said, we don't need a high school. We'll never have enough students for a high school.
Right.
In Longmeadow.
Oh.
And it's too much money.
Oh yeah. And now it's a problem. But the Longmeadow has always been good to the schools, and I'm sure it will continue to be good to the schools.
Yeah. So then when did you move to Longmeadow?
I moved to Longmeadow in 1966, and my son was going into first grade. And we were confronted with the busing in Springfield, and I just felt that they were adding too much onto the day of the child, so we moved here.
It's hard to put a little 6-year-old.
I've never been sorry because the education both of my kids got can't be replicated, I don't think.
So what school did they go to? Where'd you live?
I lived on Green Acre, and they
So
went
they went to Center?
They went to Center, the old Center, before it was rehabbed. So, and then from there they went to the middle school, and then on into
To Williams?
Williams, and then on into the high school.
Yeah, that's a great education.
Oh yes, you know, some great teachers back then. You know, I'm not that close to the teachers today, but back then there were some great teachers, Gilmar and Bob and Mr. Fuller, and just some great teachers who worked hard. Barbara Blinn.
Yeah.
I remember Barbara Blinn told my wife at the first parent-teacher conference we went to, she said, my aim in life is that when the kids come out of my second grade class, they are able to read the newspaper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he said that.
And motivated.
Yeah. And every time I see Bobby, I tell her that I said, well, you accomplished something with my son because he used to read 2 papers every day.
Wow. So Blinn, was she related to Robert?
Yep,
Blinn,
that was his wife.
Was head of the
She
parks?
was a second grade teacher, and her husband and I used to play basketball against each other for most of our young adult life.
Oh, you did? Right here in Long Meadow?
No.
Oh, in Chicopee.
No, well, I played for a Chicopee team. He played for a Springfield team. We used to play in the old Intercity League up in Holyoke.
Oh. So you came to Long Meadow, right? The boom was still going on.
Yes.
It really started in the 50s, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, my house.
And ended in the 70s when it reached the
Yeah.
population of today.
Yeah, I mean, we've got no place to go now.
Right.
It was interesting. The house I live in was built in 1955.
Yes.
So.
On Green Acre?
No, and now I live on Wildwood Glen down the south end of town.
Oh, yeah, that's a beautiful street. Yeah.
Well, my mother-in-law, when she lived with us and was alive, she used to remark that when the school bus came in the morning and picked up the kids, the next traffic on the street was the school bus in the afternoon coming home. It was just,
for Wildwood Glen.
Yeah, there's just no traffic down there. But and it's amazing. The house next door to me is the original people live there that bought the house in 1955. The one across the street is only a second generation, directly across the street from me. And the one next to me was just sold. The lady who lived there was original. Nobody moved from the street. Lately they're starting to move, but the people just stayed forever and ever.
Yeah, I've often thought that the people who stay really stay for like a long time, and then there's a certain population that moves on. They get moved by their company or whatever.
Well, there's a lot of that.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people who stay on. Like in my house, I looked at who owned it previously. People stayed for 30 and 40 years.
Yep.
My house is 100 years old now, and it's only had like 5 owners. And one of them was just for 4 years, just before I moved in. So that it was the 70s, so they could paint everything orange and green.
Yeah.
And I could spend the rest of my life trying to get rid of it. Oh, the 70s.
Oh, it wasn't. I was. We had my son moved to Belchertown, but and raised his family there. But I was thinking of one of the rooms they had drawn these hot air balloons all around the room. Every 2 inches there was a hot air balloon on the wall. We put on 5 coats of paint to try and cover those silly balloons. We could not get rid of them.
They kept shining through?
They kept shining through. Oh. You mentioned the balloons, but a lot has transpired in the years that I've been here in this town.
How big were the shops when you came here?
I don't. There was Steiger's was the main, but I honestly don't remember what was in between there. I remember the old hardware store where Hamden Bank is now.
Oh, on
the corner of Bliss and Long Meadow Street, where Hamden Bank is. That was a hardware store.
And the Friendlies around the corner.
And Friendly's was up the way.
It was called the Real Friendly's, the one that was there first. Well, Friendly's was where the Arthur Murray studio is now.
Yeah, and Chippy used to be in there, the barber shop.
Chippy was there before
Chippy was there before he moved to where he is now.
And the hardware store, but not Brightwood Hardware.
No, it was another. There were two. Brightwood was here, and that one was here.
Brightwood was already in the shops.
Yeah, but this other one. I mean, this was a 1918 hardware store. I moved here, as I said, I moved here in '66. This was a 1918 hardware store. You walked in, and it, if you can envision this with about 10 layers of dust on it. That was this hardware store. There were, as I remember, there were two elderly gentlemen who administered this and ran this and owned it. And you could ask them for anything, and they could find it. But
nobody else could.
No, nobody else could. It was, and you didn't shop around like if you were in Home Depot or Brightwood Hardware. No, you didn't roam around. You just said, "I want X," and they'd go find X. But it was really an adventure. And then there was a drugstore, and the drugstore was there too on that corner. The one that was CVS before Big Y took it over. What was it? Bliss Pharmacy? Bliss Pharmacy was there on that corner. On
Bliss?
Yes, it was down there on Bliss. And then it moved up there when that building was built. That was now Big Y. I'm not sure. I guess the Big Y is the owner of that building now. I'm not sure.
I think they own the property. But there was a market there before the Big Y, but I don't know the name.
Popular.
Was it that where the Popular Market was?
Yep.
Yeah, I think Big Y owns the property now, including Chippy's and the hardware store.
Yeah, and Kimmel the front facade was Brightwood, Kimmel's, and what was the other? There was one. I just thought of the other one. Brightwood. Oh yeah, Brightwood, Kimmel's, and Bliss Pharmacy was there. And then when Bliss sold to CVS, then it was there for a while. And then you must have been here when it was still there. And then they ultimately moved it across the street into the other shops. But Bliss used to be there, almost in the spot that if you were in the Big Y now, where the vegetables are, that would have been Bliss Pharmacy.
That's right. I remember when it expanded.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a big argument in Long Meadow, even that expansion. Then they wanted a really big expansion. It was probably the biggest town meeting ever. Tom Harala is going to come and talk about that.
And in the building, I remember when Turner Park was open. Turner Park was open. I never went there that much, but that was there, and the kids used to go there and get into their kind of mischief. But
yeah, I don't know exactly when that main building burned down. The restaurant.
Yeah,
there was a restaurant there.
I think I went to one event there, and all the time that I've been here in town, and I don't even remember what the event was, but I know it was there, and it was fairly popular.
So where did you work?
I was a CPA for a number of years. I worked for the major accounting firm, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then got wanderlust and spent 2 years in the textile business and decided my life belonged back in public accounting, and I went with the firm and
in the textile business around here?
Yeah. They just knocked my building down in the old Westinghouse complex.
Oh.
The funny part of it is I had 4 generations of my family associated with the building that they knocked down. My grandfather worked there during the Second World War. My father delivered mail there. I had an aunt who...
Oh, your father was a mailman too, like mine, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you got the assistant job.
Yes. And
it used to pay to know people.
But I had an aunt that worked there and ultimately moved out to Lima, Ohio.
What was the name of the building?
It was a Westinghouse.
It was just
that whole complex was the Westinghouse complex. And then they moved the part that my aunt was in out to Lima, Ohio. And then I went there in the textile business for 2 years, and then my son came along behind me and ran a public warehouse for a couple of years in the same building. So I used to go by. I have a client I do work for out in West Brookfield, and I go by there periodically and cry a little bit because part of my past went by me. But it was a fascinating, the stuff that they did there. I think they did some. I was going to say they thought they did some machining of nuclear stuff, but that was the old Chapman valve in Indian Orchard. But they used all the Coke machines used to be made there at the old Westinghouse. Sure, they made in the 50s. They made all the Coke machines.
That is a lot of machines.
And it was a gentleman. It was a gentleman who lived here in town. His name was Charlie Brinkman, and Charlie was one of the originators of the Super Bowl party. He used to have a huge bash down his house.
And we just had a Super Bowl. What number was it?
46.
Oh, 46. Okay.
Yeah, we don't like to dwell on it. If you're a Patriots fan, we don't want to dwell on it.
Didn't happen. Never happened. So you worked out of town. I did too.
No, I commuted. I worked locally for when I was with PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was downtown, and the firm that I ultimately went to, we were in West Springfield, so it wasn't very far. The typical Longmeadow moving out, we move out in the daytime and come back at night.
Right. Well, that's suburbs.
Which has always bothered me. It's the thing that people don't realize of the contribution that most of the people in Longmeadow make to the entire Western Mass community.
Right, and especially Springfield.
Oh yeah, I served on Mayor Neal's, one of his stadium committees when they were doing the research, and somebody said to me, "Why are you here? You don't live in Springfield." And I said, "If Longmeadow and the surrounding communities don't support a stadium, then you're not going to have it. It's not going to be economically feasible." The guy thought about it and said, "Yeah, I guess you're right." And
I always say to people, of all the surrounding towns, and Springfield is contiguous to a lot of surrounding towns, but it's Longmeadow where you see they're on the boards for the symphony and the museum and library, and the Longmeadow supports the cultural life. Longmeadow works downtown in Springfield since it's only a few minutes away, and has a really much closer relationship with Springfield, I think, than a lot of the other.
But Wilbraham is the same way. Wilbraham is as much a contributor to downtown Springfield as we are, and East Longmeadow probably the same way. And the greater Springfield doesn't recognize that. They kind of think that we're snooty in respect to them, and we're not. I think most of the people in Longmeadow realize the importance of Springfield to this total economy. But
when I interview the people who've been here longer than you and I, and they talk about taking the trolley into downtown Springfield to go to high school and to go to the movies. They had a whole lot of great movie theaters in downtown Springfield, right? My neighborhood theater was the Arcade, but the Paramount and the Capitol and Los Poli, and they had a lot of theaters, and you went there for nightlife.
Oh yes, and I can remember in my young adult life standing. Remember at the Capitol Theater, you stood in line and you went. That building wrapped around that building, went all the way down to the behind Symphony Hall.
That's
and
right.
But there were some great movie houses. I did that as
in Court Square too.
As a starter at one of my high school class reunions. I asked the people to name the theaters that were downtown.
Oh, you did? There were so many.
Yep.
Court Square,
Court Square had the vaudeville.
Vaudeville.
When you and I were in our real infancy, I think it was
My grandfather
gone.
worked there with the animals. They would have animal acts before the movies, and my pop was taking care of the animals.
My wife talks about. I don't ever recall actually going down there and seeing a show, but my wife talks about. My wife grew up in Munson, and she talks about her father used to bring her in on Sundays, and that was an event for them to come into the.
It was a big deal. It was called Down Street.
Yep.
And As a girl, we had to get dressed up. There was no wearing
Oh,
pants
yes.
down street. No.
Well, the first house I owned in 16 Acres area, Springfield, my neighbor's father wound up. He was the owner. He owned the Arcade Theater on State Street and the Art Theater.
9 cents on Saturday.
Yeah, Art Theater in downtown Springfield. And when they ever had big events, we used to get first night seats. And they did the two that I remember that we got first night seats were The Longest Day and Lawrence of Arabia. We had first night tickets. And,
Nice.
But it
Reserved seats at the movie theater
yeah, in Springfield.
in Springfield.
But yeah, they were there. Look at all of the radio stations we used to have. There were 8 or 10 radio stations that we don't have
I
anymore.
know. We used to go, when I was in high school or maybe junior high, over to WSPR on Chestnut Street
Yep.
and watch Gordy Baker spin platters. You could watch through the window as the DJ played records, and you could get an autographed picture. And
My father
was swell.
My father delivered mail there, and they had one person who used to request a song. But he used to draw a caricature and send it, requesting the song, and the DJ had to figure out what he wanted. And my father used to get these, and he said my father never could figure them out, but he said he did one, but he showed me one, but it was very interesting. But again, radio was a way of life then.
It was. Anyway, Springfield was a great city, and Longmeadow was so important to that.
Yeah.
And I think we have to get back there.
Oh, I think it's important.
So, they're doing the Rebuild Springfield, and I said, they need a grocery store downtown if you have people living downtown. It's how about putting Whole Foods in or Trader Joe or something? People from Longmeadow will come because now we have to go pretty far away for those kinds of stores. And why not have one in Springfield? And they're like, I don't think Longmeadow people would
You mean
come.
you want to go back to what was it, Kennedy's with the butter in the tubs? You don't remember that?
No, I don't remember
No,
that.
it wasn't. There was Kennedy's, and there was another market on Bridge Street. And I mean, there was butter in the tubs. You got your
just
butter in the
scooped it out?
tubs. Yep. And down on Lower Dwight Street was primarily ethnic. Part of my background is Polish, and there's a lot of Polish markets there. I can remember going with my grandmother, and you put your hand in the tub and you got your pickles. You took your pickles out of the vat.
So our half hour is up. Can you believe it? Like the wind, huh?
Flies by when you're having fun.
It was, and we are having fun. So thank you so much, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.